are stories that connect us to ourselves and each other. These stories reveal who we are and show us the many vivid, wild colors of our truth. Welcome to Soul Wanderings, where we raise spiritual awareness and foster connections through these shared stories and personal experiences. And now, exclusively on KGRA Radio, I give you your host for Soul Wanderings Radio. Here's AJ.
Hello, happy day, friends. It is Soul Wanderings night, where we receive the opportunity to hear journey stories from humans from all walks of life, all types of experiences. And these amazing humans show up to share authentic pieces of themselves with all of us. I am AJ Rasmussen, your host. Hello. It's so good to be here with you. I love Soul Wandering. I say that every week, but I just love our time together, hearing about all kinds of topics relating to our experiences of being a human. I'm really excited to be here, really excited. Our guest tonight is going to be so amazing. Her energy already has got me all giddy. You guys will adore her. If you're listening live with us, we have the chat room to hang out in. The chat room is hosted here on kgraradio.com. Head on over there if you want to chat with other listeners or ask a question for our guest tonight. I have amazing producers who hang out with all of us, and they help me grab your questions. So don't be shy. Hop in there. Wanders, tonight, did I tell you I was excited? We are chatting about one of my absolute favorite topics, NDEs, near-death experiences. This topic is one that is very near and dear to my heart. And tonight we get to spend time and hear our guest's experiences through her own NDE. And like with many others who had this experience, their entire lives before them are changed. And most times they become someone they never thought they would be during that experience, doing things they never thought they would do. We welcome to the show Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, who was involved in a car accident that changed her life forever. With vivid clarity, she was able to recount all that took place during her near-death experience, along with a reconnecting to her life's purpose, to healing. Mary Helen has facilitated healing process for countless individuals and is one of Ireland and Europe's most sought-after metaphysical healers. Please help me in welcoming to the show Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. Hello, dear. Hi.
Hi.
Quick intro for you, because I want you to share your all of your stuff, because it's so exciting. I get giddy over near-death experiences. Maybe that's a little freaky for some people, but I'm fascinated by these experiences, and I really love the aftermath, like what takes place from that experience, and you're no exception. You have had quite the journey during that experience and since.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, you're not the only one who gets giddy. Every time I talk about it, and I talk, thousands of times now over the years, it's like talking about it for the first time.
Every single time. You don't get sick of talking about it.
Never, ever, ever. Because you're always unfolding into something else. And so many times when I'm speaking about it, something will click for me and I'll go, oh my gosh, that's exactly why that was happening. And Michelangelo said it best. I'm still learning.
Oh yes, exactly. And that's part of our experience, right? We're here to learn.
Absolutely. I think that's all that we're here to do.
Before we dive into that experience you had and the aftermath thereof, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history, like who you were, what your life was like leading up to that point?
Okay. Well, you know what? The best place to start is probably in utero. You want to go right back to the beginning? Let's do it.
Why not? We have the time. Let's dive in deep, girl.
Okay. So, when my mother was pregnant with me, she was in her 40s, and I was the fourth to come along. And I think I was, we like to call it a surprise rather than a shock horror, a pleasant surprise. But when she was in her first trimester of pregnancy, she had gone to the doctor because she was unwell, and it turned out that she had the German measles. So remember, we're talking, it's, at that, I was born in 1969 in February, so this would have been 1968. So to get that kind of news back then, this wasn't a great thing, because with what was available in the day for an expectant mother in the first trimester to be told that she had the German measles was not going to fare well for the child. And so my parents were sat down and told, listen, you need to go ahead and get your heads around the fact that this baby's not going to be okay. And there could be a list a mile long of things that are going to go wrong. And you just kind of have to start getting used to that now, because this has happened in this first 3 months of development. And so my father, who was at a Southern Baptist minister, he was an amazing character. He was also a big American football player, and he was a big presence of a man. When he walked into the room just stopped, because not only was he physically large, he was spiritually very large. And he, as a minister, of course, began to pray. And he had what he described as a celestial visit, which was very interesting, because for someone who's coming from the Bible Belt of the South, you'd expect, it was angels or it was whatever, but he couldn't say that because these angels didn't have wings, and there were two. And he had two beings that came to him. And it was very difficult for him to even get his head around or talk about. But they told him that not only would his daughter be okay, but that she was going to come in with some unusual abilities. So now remember, this is 1968, we're not doing ultrasounds, and we don't know the sex of the child. And they're telling him that I was going to be a girl, and that everything would be fine, and that they would soon see that there were going to be some unusual characteristics, let's say. So I was born, and no complications and no issues, which some people to this day say is debatable. But as far as what they were expected to have, just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up as a very young child. If ever anything was wrong, or if I was sad or anything, my father would always say to me, listen, you're promised. And so that's how the very first book that I wrote, which was called Promised, that's how that title came to be, is that he had been promised by these two beings that not only would I be okay, but that I would have some unusual abilities. So you can only imagine they're kind of on watch, and I'm okay. And a couple of years pass, and I guess I was about 4, and my very, very best friend in my early childhood, and still to this day, was my grandfather, my mother's father. And he was Dr. Garland Clark. He was a surgeon from Kentucky, and he was just the neatest guy, and he was always around. And so we would have some pretty meaty conversations when I was a very small child about my purpose here, what I'd come here. He would talk to me and guide me and teach me things. And so, of course, I would tell my parents about these conversations and all. And so finally, I'll never forget the day I was sat down at the kitchen table, and my father, that big hulk of a man, he had this very, very, deep booming voice. And the two of them sat down, and he said, "Sugar, do you know what it means to be alive and dead? Do you know the difference?" And so I'm like 4, and I'm going, what?
That's a big question for a 4-year-old.
And I'm going, because all of the things that I was telling them about, that was going on, with my grandfather and all this, They were things that they knew to be true, but they knew that there's no way I could have known them because my grandfather had died when I was 1.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it kind of all began for me. And he has been a lifelong companion, confidant. He's been an integral part of so many things in my life, so many decisions that I've made, in helping to assist other people. So that was kind of how my childhood started. And, I move on a couple of years and my parents began to not, they were quietly concerned with the fact that I was having these dreams, and I would have these dreams and I would tell them about them and then they would happen. And so you can imagine now, again, we're in the South in Virginia, and he's a Christian minister, and I am coming out with some stuff that was just rocking their socks. And, you can imagine my father being the minister. He was not only preaching, but he was also doing a lot of funerals and writing eulogies. And I'd be like, Dad, Mr. Jones is going to die on Tuesday. And he was like, okay. And Mr. Jones would die on Tuesday.
You were getting specific information like that?
Very specific.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. And I never thought twice about it. It just was. People were like, oh, my God, was that so weird? For me, it would have been weird if it didn't happen because I didn't know anything different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I was quite normal growing up, only to be told, many years later that I was anything but normal. But when I hit 11, this is when some things changed for me, because my father, the minister, was also the head coach of our local football team, the Martinsville Bulldogs. And this was back in the 70s, and, school spirit was high, and it was, the marching bands and the Friday night football game. And this was why a lot of people really loved to listen to him on a Sunday morning, because he wasn't this kind of fire and brimstone type teacher. He was a very motivational type speaker, and it was always something to do with sports or football or what happened, on the football field. And he would turn that into some kind of parable or lesson, and people really enjoyed that. And so we were the Martinsville Bulldogs. And so all I ever wanted was a real bulldog. And so when I was 11, I finally got my first bulldog. And I had 3 by the time it was done. But I had Otto von Bismarck, the first, the second, and the third. And, you look back now and go, how unusual that an 11-year-old would name a dog Otto von Bismarck. But that was what I named the dog. I was a fan. And I absolutely adored this dog. And during the summer of that year, I went off to a week of camp. And I was at camp, and we were in these little kind of wooden camp huts, that had like all the bunk beds, and there were probably 20 campers in each bunk bed. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I am screaming. I'm freaking out. And the camp counselor comes running after me. I went flying out the door, and I was trying to run up to the main building. And, she ran after me and she stopped me. And then the head of the camp ended up coming out, and I was like, I have to call home. I have to call home. And they're like, sweetie, you can't call home. It's the middle of the night. And I was like, I have to call home. I have to. And they said, listen, if you're this upset in the morning, we'll let you call your parents. And so I didn't sleep at all that night. And what had happened was I had a dream that little Otto was on an operating table. And in the dream, Otto was on his back, all 4 legs up in the air, and then he fell to the side, dead. And I was devastated. And so, I was absolutely still freaking out the next morning. And so they said, look, just call your parents and talk to them. So I called home, and I was hysterical, and I was trying to tell them what had happened. They were like, no, everything's fine. Otto is fine. Everything's fine. Enjoy camp. All is well. So they came to collect me on the Saturday morning, at the drop-off point. And first thing I did was, where's Otto? How's Otto doing? And it was it was an interesting drive because back then, a special treat, or if I ever had an issue, or if my father wanted to talk to me about something, I always was taken to Hardee's. You know Hardee's, the fast
The
food restaurant?
fast food, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
we used to have one around here.
And we went for biscuits. And so conversation changed, and I, was eating my biscuit and all. I couldn't wait to get home, and nobody said anything. And I was like, something's going on here. And so we get home, and I'm looking all around, no Otto. So my parents sat me down, and they said, listen, we have some very sad news. Otto died during the week, and he happened to die when I had the dream. And it was a strange time for me because, my parents were my everything. And I think it was the first time that I began to distrust that kind of authority. Because, obviously what they wanted me to do was enjoy myself at camp, and they didn't want to deliver that news when I was away from home. And I totally understand why they did it. But for me as an 11-year-old, all of a sudden I'm going, wait a second, all of these dreams that I have, they can be bad. They can be negative, because interestingly enough, when I would dream that somebody was going to die, because of the things that my grandfather had told me about what death actually was, that didn't freak me out at all. But when it was my dog, it was a whole different story. And so I began to get kind of anxious about this. And so as I then grew into my teenage years, you can only imagine you're trying to fit in as opposed to stand out. And so my parents were always, this is something that's very special. It's a gift. And you can always talk to us about it, but we don't talk to other people about this. And
They
so
wanted you to hide it.
exactly. So I learned it, and I understand that as well. They had no instruction manual when I came in.
I don't think they do still.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get into my teenage years, and I'm kind of like, let's don't talk about this. Stuff still would happen. I would know things before they would happen, and then they would, and I'd see it in the news or whatever, but it was not something that I could share with anybody else but my parents. And, there was always the parental kind of quelling of one's anxiety or fears. And it was really an odd time. And so by the time I went off to college, I guess in my first year of college, I started to develop insomnia, because these things happened with such frequency. And then when it became my first family member, when it was my grandmother, and I had known before, I already had the backpack before the phone rang. And it had become customary for mom to call me at college, and I'd go, yeah, so-and-so just died. And she'd be like, yes, why do I even call?
Knew.
And yes. I already knew. And so I developed a really interesting, this insomnia. I would catnap during the day. So imagine you're a college student, you're trying to keep up with your work, and it was really, really chaotic. There were some interesting times where I was able to help people with some things at school, and I kind of swore them to secrecy, and suddenly I was talking about it a little bit. And so I had a roommate in college, and she just thought it was crazy and wild, and we were both cheerleaders. And so
I can see that in you.
Oh, yeah. So what I would do was, I would write down the score to the basketball game, and we'd stick it in an envelope, and then we'd go cheer at the game. And then everybody'd come back to our room, and we'd crack open a few beers and read the score of the basketball game, and everybody'd have a great laugh. And that was kind of the extent of my service to humanity at that stage in my life. Yeah. So it was when I graduated from college, and back then it was, if you were dating someone in college, that was kind of going to go further. It was the South, you're picking out the China patterns, and you're
Is that how it works?
Totally. Yeah. So I was dating somebody my senior year of school, and he was from Charleston, South Carolina. And so when we graduated, we, moved to Charleston to start our lives, with our big college degrees. And the best I could do was I got a job mopping floors in a sign company. I had my big degrees in communications and graphic design, and I had worked for ABC in Florence, South Carolina, and I'd done all this stuff, and then reality hits, and I'm a mopper.
It
And
happens. It happens.
it was the best experience ever, though, because the people who owned the company, it was a franchise, Frank and Teresa Acoin, they were the most amazing people, because not only did they teach me the principles of working in a business and learning it from the ground up, but they also had a concept of life, spirituality, and religion that I had never encountered. And
Mm.
so, they were very much so kind of like a second set of parents at that stage in my life. And so it was December 14th, 1991, and it was time for our Christmas party. And so I left my apartment and I was driving towards town. And so I got to a stoplight, which was at an intersection of a major highway, 17 in South Carolina. And I was waiting at the red light for quite some time. And unbeknownst to me, a girl that I'd actually gone to college with was a few cars behind me. Now, it just happened to be that way. Charleston's quite a large city. It was like 350,000 at that stage. So it was, one of those lovely coincidences that she happened to be a few cars back, because she actually witnessed everything that happened. And so when my light turned green, I started to make my way across the traffic, because I was going to be turning left to go towards town. So I had made it across a few lanes, and I looked left, and there was a car just barreling towards me. And that was when my whole life was turned on its ear, because in that moment, time as I knew it to that point just stopped. It ceased to exist in any construct or form that I knew it. And everything just began to crawl at a snail's pace. And so now this car that was what the police estimated at 75 miles an hour coming at me was now creeping. And I knew in that moment that I was getting ready to die. And it was so interesting because, as the daughter of the Southern Baptist minister, everything that was happening in that moment was absolutely nothing like I had been told would happen when I died. I was suddenly very aware that I was very much in control, that I could experience this in whatever way was going to benefit me the most for my own understanding and growth and future expansion. And so I was like, this is going to hurt. That car was going fast. And so my options were stay in the body and experience the impact, or take off before I get hit. And so what would you do? I took option B.
You were actually getting an option before the accident occurred.
The accident occurred.
I haven't heard of that yet.
This is concurrent time making its presence known.
Dang.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And what was so fascinating at this point was, we were talking before we went on the air about frequency. Everything I do now is about frequency. But in that moment, there was this sound. And, you told everybody I live in Ireland, and I love traditional Irish music. And I play the bodhrán, which is the round drum that you'd see in an Irish session. And one of my favorite instruments is called the Uilleann pipes. Uilleann means elbow in Irish. And they're like bagpipes, but the bag is under the arm as opposed to a bag that somebody blows into. And so they make this fabulous low droning noise. And I absolutely love that sound. And it's the closest thing that I can equate to the sound that I was hearing during this time when time stood still. And so there's this low drone. And I have now come to learn that drone, that low vibration, that sound is what keeps one tethered to the earth plane or to the physical body. And so as that sound was going, and I had made my choice that I didn't want to be in the body when that car hit me, I'm suddenly out of my body and looking down at the whole scene. Mm. And the second that I was in that space looking down, everything sped up. It came back into kind of my concept as a human of what I knew time to be. And boom, the car smashes into the driver's side. It T-boned me. And so, of course, I was driving in the car by myself. And so it smashed directly in, folded the car in half, blew the windows out. My head took the driver's side window out. So my head went out, my neck broke. And I'm watching all of this happen. And it was so interesting because I knew that was my body. I knew then very distinctly that body wasn't me. And to me, the soul or the spirit looking down at the body, it was no different than the body that was using the vehicle that I was driving to get from A to B. I was looking at my own body as the vehicle that I had been driving to traverse my earthly experience.
Incredible. You had that understanding while you were witnessing this.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. This is a really great place to start. We can talk about what happens next. We're going to take our first break for the evening. You guys stay close. I know you all want to hear what happened next. We'll be right back.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 945-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. That's 945-882-7221. Or go to the website angioprim.com.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Permanent industrial glue impossible to remove? Not anymore, because Handyman Formula by D-Bond is a patented chemical adhesive remover. It's used in the building and home maintenance industry, but now it's available for your home use, for your DIY projects. Unglue stickers, silicone rubber, labels, price tags, flex tape, weather stripping, carpet glue, wood glue, liquid nails, even 3M 5200. And it dissolves graffiti. Yeah, graffiti. Handyman Formula by D-Bond works, and it's safe to use on most surfaces. No need to call a professional. Don't get out the pliers and blowtorch. Just apply a little Handyman Formula by D-Bond and wait 90 seconds, then quickly and easily pull the items apart. Get unstuck. Visit DBondHandymanFormula.com. That's DBondHandymanFormula.com, or call 561-575-4200. Handyman Formula by D-Bond.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Soul Wanderings here on KGRARadio.com. We are visiting with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley this evening, and she is sharing with us about her NDE, her near-death experience. And we just barely got to the very beginning of it. We haven't even really got into it yet. So if you missed the first part of the show, we're going to pick up where we left off and hear what happens next. Hold on, you guys. This is a story. Already, with you viewing your physical form, watching this accident happen, it just blows my mind. I was saying that during the commercial break. And that you had an option to do so. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I did.
Something else.
Yeah, it was, it was quite incredible. But it's funny, what accompanies that is just this knowing, this instantaneous knowing that, oh, okay, that's how this works.
Oh, I get it. It's like a light bulb, like a remembering.
It is like a remembering. And what's so funny is that you're like, oh, okay, well, I've done this before. And then you're kind of laughing to yourself going, oh, wait a minute, I've lived so many times. And that's definitely not a concept that I learned in Sunday school.
Yeah, they don't teach that in religion very often, do they?
No, definitely not. But so picking up where we were, there I was, freshly dead. And
I love your humor. I it's so inappropriate, but I love it.
This body, you couldn't live this life without a sense of humor.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So at this stage, where we were is I've just been, literally knocked out of my body. But what was so interesting is I was up and out before the impact. And so this is something where I like to say to people, for those of you who have lost somebody near and dear, and maybe really struggle with the way that they died, it is so important to remember, especially even in those most tragic moments. We tend to be a little bit better with it when it's serene and peaceful, and they went quietly, or they went in their sleep. But so many people have experienced deaths of loved ones in other ways, like murder, and horrific accidents, and they really have trouble getting their heads around the idea that that person that they knew or loved had died so violently. And it is imperative that people know that this same process happens for everybody when they go through death. And so I don't care what way it is that your loved one has gone, we all get to this space, and this time bending happens. And the individual is very much so aware and in control. At this, I'm talking about a car coming at me at 75 miles an hour that just halts. So someone who's on the receiving end of a bullet from a gunshot, that bullet will just slow down, stop. And that individual it is. And that individual will have that opportunity to either remain in and experience the death, in the body, if there's something in that experience that they need, or they're up and out. It's like dropping clothes off. And this is where I also like to describe to people when they're like, oh my gosh, you're hovering over, looking down at your dead body in this car. I'm watching my own car spin around. I'm watching my head go through the window and my neck breaking. And I'm seeing the seat fold up under me and glasses shattered, and it's spinning, the car is spinning around the intersection. And I'm looking at this, and people are like, oh my God, weren't you freaking out and trying to get back in there? And the best way, and I tell it every time, but it is truly the best way to describe it. If you can picture being outside on a really hot day, and you're out maybe in the garden or mowing the lawn or doing whatever, and you're really hot and you're sweaty, and you finished your work and you come inside and you peel off those nasty clothes and you throw them down next to the washing machine. And then you go get into the shower and you have this glorious shower and you're washing off all the muck and the grime and it just feels so good. The last thing that you are thinking about is trying to get back into those nasty clothes that are sitting on the floor next to the washing machine.
Yeah, gross.
And so when you're looking at your body, you look down and there's this kind of very peculiar detached interest in the body. Oh, well, there it was. That's great. Cheers. Thanks, Emil. But you're not identifying as that any longer. And there's a complete disconnect from that. And so that's a really interesting thing and something I think that's very important for people to know, that that terror that a lot of people often associate with a tragic or horrific experience around death, it's just simply not there. It is maybe for the people who are still alive and witnessing, but not for the individual who's going through it.
That you automatically feel that disconnect from your meat suit.
Absolutely. So,
we place so much emphasis on our bodies. It's crazy.
I know. Does my butt look big in this body?
Right.
It's just, we're so hard on ourselves, and we're so judgmental towards, our physical appearance. And, one of the things, I'm so happy that this happened to me at such an early age. I was 21. And so, those are very impressionable years in a young woman's life, in anybody's life, where you're very conscious about your appearance and all. And I was so grateful that happened back then, because I have, I try to always look after myself, and I'm well groomed, and I try to eat well, and I exercise and all, but I don't place the type of emphasis on that aesthetic beauty maybe that other people would who wouldn't have had that experience. I look more now at the gratitude of, I look down at the little belly and I go, gosh, I've given birth to 2 children, and
I love that.
My scars and I love my scars and my wrinkles and all of it, because it means I'm still here. I'm still in the game.
Yeah.
And, so as I was watching the accident unfold, what was really interesting was, I mentioned earlier that girl that I'd gone to college with, her name was Mim, and she was a few cars behind me, and she'd been a suite mate of mine my freshman year of school, and we'd been good friends, and she happened to live in Charleston and just happened to be at that intersection at that time. And I remember seeing her recognize my car. And all of a sudden, what was so interesting, I could feel what she was feeling. And I could feel her panic. I could feel her pain or upset. I could feel these things. And I wasn't upset myself, but I could experience it through her. And I always thought that was so interesting.
That is very interesting.
As I was watching, when everything kind of ground to a halt, and, the cars had stopped, and, eventually, people were starting to gather, and there was this weird situation where this woman had written down her name and phone number. And, I always thought this was so bizarre, because there's the car and the windows are blown out, and she walks up to the car and put her name and number on the passenger seat of the car. I'm like, there's a dead body in the car.
Wow,
and
really?
She does this. Yeah. And I always thought that was so weird. And to this day, I don't know, could she, did she have somewhere else she needed to be, or did she not want to take part in that moment, or whatever it was? But I just remember seeing that. And then the police arrived, and there was a guy, of course, in uniform, who came over and reached through the passenger side window and turned the engine off so the car wouldn't blow. And I was literally, look at that body was crushed. The car was, it looked like a V, and my body was pinned in there on that left-hand side. And so I watched him turn that off. And at that moment, that low drone that I described suddenly became something else. And I like to call it the music of the spheres. It became the most unearthly, beautiful series of tones, frequencies, sounds, just a celestial symphony. It was incredible. To this day, I still am trying to recreate those sounds, because it was just extraordinary. And it was with those sounds that all of a sudden I wasn't there anymore. So I went from hovering above and being still part of the earth plane and being able to see what was happening to somewhere else. And this is where everybody always asks, was that the tunnel? And my tunnel was so fast that I didn't see anything. I think the tunnel is more an illusion. And it's that instantaneous drop into the light. But for me, it wasn't just a bright light. It was this incredible surrounding. The atmosphere was palpable. Like you could actually, it was like the air around me. You could mold it. You could touch it. It was, you're in this etheric body, and obviously you're not in physical form any longer. But I still had this sense of cohesiveness. I was still me. I still knew I knew who I'd just been, only now I knew I was so much more than that. And I was, I'm remembering at lightning speed. And so I'm just basking. And this is kind of that moment that, like, when I was describing the clothes are on the floor by the washing machine and you're in the shower having that beautiful shower, and you're kind of washing off the experience of having just lived 21 years in that body. And it was amazing. It was just the most peaceful and serene feeling. And there is absolutely not a thought going through me at that stage of trying to get back. I was absolutely perfectly content exactly where I was. And so how long did I stay in that space? I have no idea. What's unfolding on the ground beneath me, I have no idea, because I'm no longer witnessing that. And so as I was in this space, all of a sudden that atmosphere began to take shape in front of me. And these two beings just, they formed out of thin air. They formed right in front of my eyes. And they were just the most wonderful, and they were so familiar. And yet still, I couldn't place my finger on who they were. And they just waited. And so I'm looking, and that moment, somebody, I'm of an age now where I could, let's say if I'm in my office and I'm working with my patients, and it might be a patient I've known for 20 years, and I know them in my office setting, and I see them and I know their family. And then let's say I get caught on the hop in the grocery store, and someone says hi to me, and I'm going, I can remember all of your spinal misalignments, but I can't think of your name all of a sudden,
Yeah.
And so this kind of thing happens
all the time.
Yeah. So I'm looking at these two, and they were male in appearance. And I know for a fact that they didn't have to take on that appearance, but you're just dead and all. And I think probably they're trying to take a little of the shock out of the whole thing. And so they just looked like these, very grandfatherly type figures. And I remember the color of what they had on them. And they, did somebody in a light body need to be wearing something? No. So I really think this was for my benefit. And these caramel colored, this beautiful, rich caramel color that I'd never seen before. And just this, everything had this sheen, like this pearly essence to it. And it was just, it just, makes me tear up thinking about it.
Right.
And I'm just looking at them, and they're waiting and waiting. And finally the penny drops. And I'm like, oh my God, these are my guides. These are my guardians. And they were just delighted, and they just enveloped me. Whatever I was in that space, they just enveloped me.
Was it like a homecoming?
Oh, it was the homecoming of all homecomings. because now suddenly, as I'm remembering all of these things, I'm going, oh my gosh, we all have guides. Even in our darkest moments when we think we're all by ourselves, we're never, ever, ever alone. They knew everything about me from.
How did you have that knowing though? How was that something you were aware of?
It was just there.
It was just a knowing. It's just
yeah.
truth.
It was just there. And any communication, obviously wasn't by mouths because I didn't have one. They had the appearance of mouths, but it was just a mental kind of telepathic type of communication. And so they were just celebrating with me. And so it was just this amazing feeling of being welcomed back. And it was then that, again, there's like this transference of information, and I'm remembering, I'm going, it's just like all these ahas. Oh yeah. Oh God. Oh yeah. And when I kind of got through that phase of it, it was time for, I hate even saying the life review because it sounds so cliche, but that's what it was. And this is where it got fascinating. And this, again, was where the expansion of my understanding of time being a construct that we use in this 3D plane really got turned on its ear. Because it was like I was there in the center. And it was like a 360 view around me of my life, but everything happening simultaneously. So it wasn't this chronological kind of review of life from birth to 21. I was 3, I was 11, I was 17, I was winning Living History Day in the 7th grade. I was going off to college, watching my parents click their heels at the end of the driveway. I was 17 and drinking too much at a college party and being raped, and I was all of these things happening at the exact same time.
Incredible.
And you want to talk about a paradigm shifting, mind blowing experience. I will sometimes just sit and kind of ruminate over, on that moment. And I have to stop because it's, whatever this brain is capable of digesting, when I get too deep into that, I kind of just short circuit and it just shuts down, because it's almost unfathomable. But
it does seem incomprehensible.
Yeah, but there it was, and it was all happening around me. And so what was really interesting, for the preacher's daughter, the Southern Baptist kid who's been told all of her life, this is the point where you're going to go through the judgment, and you're either taking the elevator up or down. And I'm like looking around, and I'm looking at my experiences, and I'm watching my life, and I'm critiquing my performance, and not with a critical eye, but one where I'm learning, and I'm looking, because I lived those experiences, so I remembered them well.
But this is a different point of view.
Exactly. I've got a different point of view of my own life, one as an observer, as opposed to the participant. And so I'm watching this, and I'm like, that was pretty awesome right there. Gosh, you know what? If I were to do that differently, the impact would have been this, that, or the other. And you watch this domino effect of these small little things. And, I'm thinking that these great things that I would have done in my 21 years, that would have been kind of first and foremost up at the forefront. And it wasn't. It was these tiny little things, these things that I thought were inconsequential, these thoughts, these manifestations of my intent or my compassion or my sorrow. These are the things that are showing up front and center. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
So it's not a life review of your rights and wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
They're experiences, but you're not in your human form with your human mind anymore, yet you're still looking at it from that perspective.
Exactly. It becomes, rather than being objective as the experiencer, it's subjective as someone who's looking on to an experience that a human being has just had, even though you were just that human being. You're looking at that with this understanding and this overwhelming compassion and this feeling of, wow, look how brave you were. Look how incredible that was. Look what, and even in the toughest moments when I would have made maybe some very, very bad choices, if we were judging those with our human minds.
Right.
And I'm looking at that going, oh, that happened because this needed to happen. Oh, that had to happen that way. That had to be that painful in order for this to take place. And you're seeing this incredible domino effect take place in your own life and that ripple effect into the lives of others. And suddenly your perspective, exactly, you're seeing your perspective and this realization of, oh my God, we're fractals of the same whole. All I was doing,
connected.
Yes, was looking at my life through these eyes and realizing that every other life that had crossed my past, or my past and my path, was literally a piece of me. I was a fractal of that whole, experiencing the world through billions of different eyes.
What was that moment like for you? I'm getting teary just thinking about how incredible it must have felt.
I tell you what happened right then was, as I'm kind of digesting the enormity of that, I am now like, put me back in, coach. I'm going back.
Really?
And absolutely. And this is where it's important to know that people have that choice. Now, some people don't feel like that was a choice. I have a friend that I speak with often, Peter Bedard, who had a very similar near-death experience. But his experience of coming back in was he did not want to come back. And, the ramifications of that were years of depression and dealing with the physical calamity, the fallout of his actual accident and the dark days that went with that. And mine was so different. I could not wait to I knew I was going back into a body that was crushed, broken neck. I knew that was what I was going back into. And it suddenly didn't matter, because I wasn't valuing myself by that body any longer. I was back in that knowing, back in that space going, oh my gosh, what an incredible gift it is just to be in a body. It doesn't matter. A soul that is coming into a body, even if it is, even if there were no arms, there were no legs, or if it was blind, or if it was deaf, or if, whatever the challenge was within the body, that essence, that who we really are, is there to experience it exactly in the way that body has to offer. And it was just, I could not wait. I was so excited. And so it was a given now at that stage that I was going to go back in, and that was my choice to do that. And so
that just blows my mind. Of all of the people I have had the chance to talk to about their NDE, I've never once have heard anyone excited to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because of where they've been. It's so magnificent compared to this experience we're going through.
Well, all of a sudden what happens is that place to be, that's home. That's where you'll return there. You'll go back. And it wasn't even home, because everything that we're taught here, the religious tenets, the dogmas that we subscribe to as people, it always creates that space as a final destination. And where I was more like Grand Central Station. It was, the halfway house for spirits. I wasn't in any way, shape, or form in any kind of final destination, because I suddenly had this realization that, oh God, that's what they mean, that, we're infinite, that we're eternal, that we're omnipotent, that we're divine, that it goes on. I got it, because that space between was not a final destination. And when you have that understanding and knowing in that moment, then you suddenly look back and go, oh my gosh, what a privilege it is to be in that body for this short space of time.
Very
no matter
short.
no matter what that body looks like, feels like, can do or can't do. The fact that I am able to go and occupy that is my great pleasure. It is my great privilege. And so
What a
I was like,
blessing.
yeah, I'm like, I'm going back. But before I did, these beings, these guardians, they were like, all right, this is great. You're going back in, but you're going to go back in and things are going to be a little different. Because what was so interesting, as I described before, I had these quite extraordinary abilities. And as I described as a cheerleader in college, my stewardship to humanity with these gifts left a lot to be desired.
Right.
And
Guessing the
so,
game scores.
exactly.
You
And so
could do
what was
so much
happening?
more. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what was happening then was I was like, oh my gosh, I actually created this accident opportunity that if I had not found my way, if I had not learned how to use these gifts in the way that I had intended, that I put basically a foolproof safety net for myself to have an experience to remember what I'd actually come here to do. And so I always find it quite ironic that I chose 21, that the kind of proverbial reaching of adulthood. And as I tell my children every single day, when they'll talk about, if somebody does something, they're like, a grown-up shouldn't do that. An adult shouldn't be acting like that. And I'm like, girls, a number has nothing to do with maturity or adulthood. You can be 50 and a child, and you could be 12 and have the wisdom of the universe. And, it was very, very apparent at that stage that I had not made it to the space where I was using these abilities in service, and that I had set this up in order to remind myself what I had actually come here to do.
I love that. I love that you were able to have that experience to remember who you are and what your purpose was. Unfortunately, it came with a lot of aches and pains when you returned, I'm sure. And we'll hear more about that after this break. With the next hour, we are commercial free, you guys, so stay close. We'll be right back.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. Getthetea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's getthetea.com. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go. Please listen. Now is not the time to fear When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath, no garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves! Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at GetTheTea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com and build your shields. That's GetTheTea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
Now you have the inside contact for Alternative Talk Radio. The Planet. KGRARadio.com.
You are listening to Soul Wanderings here on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, Salt Lake City, Utah, Hudson Valley, New York, and Soul Wanderings can be found on all of your favorite listening platforms like iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, all of the places. Just go to your favorite place and look for us. And all of my shows are available for replay directly on soulwanderings.com. So if you're enjoying this show, head over there, share with your pals. The more the merrier, as I always say. Tonight we are visiting with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. She's an author, chiropractor, and a metaphysical healer. Also a near-death experiencer, as well as, what would you call yourself, Mary Helen? An intuitive, a medium? What title do you put on the ability to speak with?
A window washer.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. Love that analogy. A window washer. It would be neat for you to explain that to everyone at some point, but you're sharing with us your experience, your near-death experience that you had. The first hour, if you guys missed it, she took us through her experience of crossing over and then choosing to come back to her physical body. And that's where we left off. Would you like to take it from there, darling?
Yeah. So, I'm being informed before I go back in that I'm going to go back and things are going to be different. Now I've had the big aha. Now I've remembered. Oh gosh, I know. Now I know what I came here to do. All of a sudden, and it's so funny that all the conversations all of my life with my grandfather, Dr. Garden Clark, who I called Judge, all my conversations with Judge were now making a lot of sense. But it was so funny because he never, ever, ever forced or pushed anything. It was something that happened very organically, and I had to come to in my own way. And, you'd think, oh my gosh, that's a bit harsh. You have to break your neck and die in a car accident. Well, yes, because I had these incredible abilities. I had, for whatever the reason, the ability in human form to tap into some of that human potential that I think, we have barely scratched the surface on. I'm a great fan of the noetic sciences and the tapping of human potential and what we're capable of, and that the brain isn't just something that sits inside the skull, but that we're this living, breathing, working network where all of the parts are working with the whole. And, it was just, you just like, I got it. Get me back. Here I go. And so with that promise that they would always be there to support and guide, and that keep my eyes open because some interesting times were coming ahead, and they were going to raise the bar and things were going to get very interesting. So back I went, breakneck speed, literally broken neck. And I am laying on the pavement and I'm being strapped to a board and immobilized. But what was so funny was there was a moment, because my friend actually witnessed this. There was a moment that when they had gotten me out onto the pavement, that I was back in and went to try to stand up.
No way.
And then yep. And then collapsed down to the ground, and then, was out again, and then strapped on the board. And then I'm in the back of the ambulance, and now I'm kind of coming in and out of consciousness. And I remember I'm crying and I'm talking about dying. And I can still feel one of the ladies who was in the back of the ambulance with me was stroking my head. She was stroking my hair, and she's like, "Don't worry, sweetie. We're not going to let you die. You're going to be okay." And I'm going, "No, I've already been dead." Like that's what I'm thinking. I can't say anything. And, I'm just crying, and get to the hospital. And it was a Saturday. And what was so interesting, and this is, again, a really important part of the way that everything unfolded, I was taken to a teaching hospital. And I don't know if it was short-staffed or what actually happened, but I somehow kind of fell through the cracks. When I awakened in the ER, I could hear the loudspeaker, and I was in the bed, and I was noticing that I couldn't swallow properly. And I didn't know at the time that my neck was broken. And neither did they, because nobody had x-rayed it. And so the next thing that I remember in the ER is this man walking into the room, and I'm kind of, I'm like blinking and looking at him, and I'm like, he doesn't look like a doctor. And he was in a uniform. And so he said, the first thing he said to me was, "You're one lucky little lady." And I'll never forget him saying that. And he said, "Do you think you can tell me what happened?" And I'm kind of looking at him, and my voice was all gravelly, and I couldn't swallow, and I was trying to move in the bed, and I just felt like I'd been crushed because I had. And I was trying to move and sit up to say something to him. And then next thing, I was kind of finding my voice, and he said, "Can you tell me what happened?" And the first thing I said to him was, "Mim, my college friend, she was there. You need to get in touch with her." And he's kind of looking at me, and I said, "And there was this woman, and there's a phone number, and there was some officer, you need to talk to him because he turned the car off." And next thing, he looked like a deer in headlights, because it turns out he was that officer. And he's looking at me, and he goes, "How could you possibly know that?" And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "I'm the one who was there." They had to get the jaws of life and the whole thing. And he said, "There's no way, you were gone. And there's no way you could know what you just told me." And we both just sat there. And he's like starting to kind of back out of the room backwards, And
he knew what happened.
You imagine the dinner conversation in his house that night.
Right.
And I'm just like, and now I'm sitting in this ER by myself going, holy crap, what just happened? And so what was so fascinating about it was that it was actually a chiropractor, Dr. Anthony Ross in Charleston, who was the individual who ended up piecing my life back together, because it was he who got to the source of all of my problems, the cracks in the pelvis, the broken spine. It was he who found all of this, and it was he who helped me start to rehabilitate and get back together. And it was like when I was in the ER in the hospital, it was like I was left kind of to fend for myself, not only physically, but emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was so bizarre, because my grandfather had said to me then, this is a little bit later, and he's like, "You're going to go to chiropractic school." And I went, "I'm going where?" And I just finished 4 years of college, and I
It wasn't on your radar at all.
I was not going back. And, I had done my time, and I'm like, what? And he's explaining to me that it was imperative to what I would be doing in the future, that I learned a vitalistic philosophy, a vitalistic approach to the human body, that we were not just pieces and parts, that we were not, what allopathic medicine would look at, and, that, something's broken, we fix it, or we take it out, we remove it, or we medicate it. And look, there's a time and a place for everything, like if I had, again, if I was in a car accident like that, I'm waiting for the paramedics to show up, not my chiropractor,
Right.
But the way that my life was going to go, he felt that it was important because, here I am thinking, well, you're a surgeon, like you're a real doctor. Why do I have to go there? What are you talking about? And, it wasn't until I got to school that I realized exactly what was happening. Because when I came back in, not only were these synchronicities and amazing coincidences beginning to happen, as in I would be in the right place at the right time in order to, create some kind of, or facilitate some kind of miraculous event for somebody, or walking out of the grocery store and an old man walks up to me and he winks at me. He goes, "Oh, you've been there." And I went, "What?" And he said, "You have a double heart chakra." I said, "A what?" And that was when I learned that, people who have died and gone out of the body, left this plane and come back in, that there's a visible double heart chakra. Well, I could see that on other people, but never knew what that was. And because that's something I was always able to do from the time I was young. But it was funny because it wasn't until I was in school, and I was in a philosophy class with one of my favorite teachers, and he was telling this great story about this old chiropractor who had these special abilities, and he could run his hand up somebody's back and he could tell what was going on inside the body. And he goes, kind of like those people who can see auras or colors or energy around other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go up to him at the end of class and he's like, "Mary Helen, I see I've confused you in some way." And I'm like, "Yeah, why did you tell that story?" And you're talking about this doctor who's got these extraordinary abilities, but you're comparing it to something ordinary that we all do, or, and he was laughing and he was like, "I think you need to come down to my office." And I had made it all of those years without realizing that everybody didn't see the same stuff that I saw.
You just thought it was a normal thing that we all had the ability to do.
Yeah, don't you look at trees and see the glowing light around them? And that's why I get so tickled, with all my friends who go through the whole, are we vegan? Are we meat eaters? Are we this? Are we that? And I'm like, y'all, everything's alive.
Yes,
everything is alive. And so it's whatever serves your soul in this purpose, eat what you feel like you need to eat, because all of it's alive and all of it's food.
Right.
Everything is food. Every emotion, everything that we touch, all of it's food that we have to digest, either in the spiritual, the emotional, or the physical.
Right.
And it was this incredible experience of you're looking at the world through a completely different set of eyes now. And I suddenly then realized, oh my gosh, this is why they sent me to chiropractic school, because I had my hands on so many people. And, as a chiropractor, I can legally feel everybody up. And,
yes,
because what was happening was I now had, in addition to the dreams and the being able to know things before they happen, I had come back in with this ability to touch somebody and kind of download their hard drive. And so let's say somebody had cancer or depression or whatever. I could download why. And it might be a why that was in this lifetime or in a concurrent, we like to say past life. And I often talk about past lives because when you speak about concurrent lives, it blows people's minds and they can't digest it.
Right.
And so we try to speak, in everybody's love language, which is something that they can, at least wrap their heads around a little bit and get some semblance of understanding. But I'm now touching people and I'm like getting these mind movies. And so if somebody is dealing with something at 47 and I'm suddenly going back to, an abuse scenario when they're 12 and recognizing that the physical creation of the illness to bring their attention to the fact that they need to deal with this is coming from something at the age of 12. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I had to learn how to deal with this. And so they placed me in a position where I was going to be able to touch all of these people and start honing these skills. And that was why I actually was sent to chiropractic school.
This is what I was talking about in the beginning of the show. When you have an experience like this, who and what you are changes completely. What was on your radar for your future is definitely changed.
I still use my art degree. I've designed my own business cards, but
well, good for you. Glad that didn't go to waste.
No, but it's just this totally different, this whole different approach to where there's this urgency, and it's a great pleasure, that urgency that you just want to help you. And it's not that you want to heal everything, because the beautiful part, when we were talking there about how I described myself and I said a window washer, it's because healing isn't about making everybody better or getting rid of what ails them necessarily. Healing is about wiping the windows clean so that people can see out for themselves and find their own way home.
Exactly.
And so you have these extraordinary abilities and you're downloading this information, and suddenly, early on, I'm literally touching somebody and I'm getting this movie and I'm going, oh, okay, well, you've got your cancer because of this, 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 and this. And they might have come into me and then walked out without cancer. And that's brilliant for the ego. Oh, how wonderful is that? I've just healed cancer. And then luckily maturity sets in. And you suddenly realize this has nothing to do with you, sunshine. You're just a vessel. You're just bringing this through so that they can find out how to heal themselves. Because inevitably what happens in those situations where you try to bypass the reasons why, the actual understanding, that's why I named my latest book, Understanding is the New Healing. If you try to bypass that, inevitably it will show up in some other form, physically or emotionally. Yep. And so if you can guide people to a space where they understand, where they left that piece of themselves, where they gave that piece of their power away, and you can explain to them that they can go reclaim that. And sometimes that doesn't always end up the way that we want it to. We'd like to think everybody lives, yay. But that's not what the human experience is about. We all die. And we have done this awful thing to ourselves where we have started to quantify the value and validity of a life experience based on its quantity.
That's us being our human selves.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so, I guess my job is to continue to shout it from every rooftop, guys, let yourselves off the hook, go out and do it all, live it, risk it,
It's neat that you had this experience at such a young age, so you were able to do so much more with this human experience that you're having. Mm-hmm. I find myself in my 40s having learned a lot of this stuff that you're talking about within the last 8-9 years. Mm-hmm. And obviously you can't wish away your past, but you wish that you had longer. Like, I wish I would have had this experience sooner. We all do that because that's our human brain. But that being here and right now in the present moment, knowing that we all have the ability to make a difference, to assist someone, whether we have the same gifts you possess or our very own gifts, we all have a gift to share.
Absolutely. And where this is so important, what I was sharing about the review experience, where you're suddenly realizing that time is not linear, it's concurrent. It's happening all at the same time. So the fact that you're in your 40s and you're making these discoveries has a direct impact on who you think you have been, because it's all happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
So
That
there's
is
no
mind-blowing.
need. It is indeed. There's no need to
really-
wish it away.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like I was there. But then you have an experience that gives you the perspective, and where I have the opportunity to meet with so many amazing people like yourself, you are reminded, you know what, you're taking this too seriously, or have a little more fun here, or do that thing you keep talking about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love Michelle Obama has a quote where she says, when they go low, we go high. And I've liked to take that a little bit further, because when they go low, the only reason that we know how to go high is because we were low at one time.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that not knowing, that not understanding that you might have had before, the last decade, is so essential in your growth and expansion as a human being.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think some of us have an ND and get to go home, and some of us do not?
Not necessarily because we're the chosen ones by any means. It's because I'm thinking, like I told you before, I was a little too thick to be using these wonderful gifts that I had in a way that was in any way, anything that resembled service. And I had to have that experience in order to kind of recalibrate and get back on track.
So you could be here and live your true purpose.
Exactly.
And I love that you became a chiropractor. I think that practice is magic, especially when the doctor has the healing abilities like you have. It's complete magic to me. Excuse me. I've been blessed to be spending some time with one myself the last couple of months, but tell me more about those healing abilities. Are you still able to see when someone is at the end of their human experience?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, is that something you share with them, or do you just direct them in a way so they can make the choice themselves if they have the option to do so?
No, I would never. I would never tell somebody like a date or a time, although I would quite often know.
Right. Good.
That's something, because so often people are, what I call fence sitters, especially when they're coming in and they're in the middle of some disease process or something that's going on, that could potentially end their lives. Oftentimes it's a crossroads for them. And, there are choices that can be made and things that can be let go of that will either create a more knowing, peaceful, and better passing, or that they extend their time, that they recognize the fact that, oh, this wasn't actually how I needed to go out. I just needed to have this experience in order to have this new understanding.
Mm. So you're not playing, I'm not saying you're playing God, but you're assisting and directing them for the moment for them to have for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's never in my hands. That's not how that works. You're literally there. Like I said, you're washing windows. You are facilitating something for, my job is to assist somebody in reaching whatever their spiritual goal was. Mm-hmm. Sometimes life gets in the way, and we forget, and we become encased in fear, and we become distrustful of our own magnificent abilities and power. And
that's very true. That's one of the things I love. I have a business. It's a mind, body, spirit shop, but we do spiritual healing and practices there. And I love that moment where we're assisting someone in finding that aha moment, mm-hmm. that remembering of that light that's inside of them, mm-hmm. and the magic that's inside of them. That feeling is indescribable. It's kind of addicting for me. I'm not going to lie.
of course
I
it
get
is. Yeah.
excited. I'm jumping up and down, clapping my hands. It's a really exciting, giddy moment when humans have that moment like, oh my gosh, I'm a magical being. Like I matter and I have purpose.
And I get that same feeling when I see somebody recognize, hang on a second, this thing that I think that is so bad, that, that boss that I'm having such difficulty with, or this spouse that I'm having trouble with, or, my troubled teenager, or whatever, when they recognize that same joy and that same beauty in those difficult moments. Because what has happened to us is that we equate positivity and spirituality. And that when we're having those feel good moments, we've become addicted to feeling good. And what's happened in that process, and that's part of the whole kind of quick fix world we live in, is that what we've done is we've negated those very crucial experiences where we're uncomfortable. Because it is essential to our growth and development that we get in those very uncomfortable moments, that we learn how to have that same stillness and that same presence in those moments that are really, really difficult, the same way that we do when we're in those pockets of joy or bliss or excitement. But that's what the earth plane has to offer. It's that dichotomy, the dichotomy of dark and light. And we're constantly trying, it's all about the light. It's all about the light. It's not. It's about both.
Yes.
It takes the dark and the light threads to weave a beautiful tapestry.
Yes, I love that you shared that. I agree completely. And I get that we forget it, but the remembering when it happens is just really incredible. We have a question from the chat room. How does your experience align with your Christian faith? At least you were growing up Christian. I'm not sure what your faith is now. However, how with you being able to communicate with spirit and all of your other experience, how does that align for you?
Okay. The best way I can describe that, there's a beautiful person who's a very dear friend of mine. Her name is PMH Atwater. And PMH is probably the foremost researcher on near-death experience that I know. She's written volumes on the subject. And she's somebody that you should look into having on your show. She is just a hoot. She has an incredible story, but she has worked with all ages, particularly children. And she was given a presentation once. We were at the ARE, the Edgar Casey facility in Virginia Beach, which is near and dear to my heart. I've done a lot of speaking there. And my grandfather Judge, when he was alive, he used to consult with him. And she did this presentation on this new book she was working on, and it was about children's near-death experiences. And she had these drawings, and she was projecting them overhead. And there was this one that really, really stuck with me. And I think it's a good way to describe the question that you've just asked. This child had drawn this image, and there was this little box with a cross on it down in the bottom corner. And then there was all on the rest of the paper in yellow, this light coming out of the box. And that was what it was like. It's not that Christianity was wrong. It was perfect in its construct for what it was meant to do, but it was small compared to everything. So when I talk about, my foundations in Christianity, my, learning about the sense of community, and I'm talking true Christianity, not just, they show up on a Sunday just to be seen. I'm talking about the true practice of that Christ energy. It was, I think that image for me, it just says it all, because it shows that little box, and it shows that cross, and it shows that, that's one compartment, that's one box. And I'm a fan of boxes. People talk about boxes, or, we like to be out of the box. And it's so funny, because when they say that, it's like they're creating some kind of exclusivity that, you're more enlightened because you're not in the box. And I'm like, guys, that's what this place is made up of. It's boxes. We jump from box to box to box to box in order to learn, in order to grow and expand. And so boxes give us a temporary construct around an idea in order for us to embody that, embrace that, experience that, and then to grow out of that. And so for me, and for having grown up in that religion, I would never trade the idea of, we're Southern Baptists, man. We ate cover dish dinners all the time. I loved that. And I was in a very active youth group, and I really enjoyed that. And I used to sing in the choir, and I played handbells, and there were some really, really great things out of that. And I was very fortunate to have grown up in a family where it was always more expansive as opposed to something that was exclusive. And there's a beautiful story that I'd like to share with you about that. As I mentioned before, my father was a Christian minister. And when he was dying, he had Alzheimer's. And he had gotten to a stage where it was very uncomfortable for people who knew him to see him the way that he was when he had gotten into the, he had to go to the nursing home because he was a danger to himself and to my mother. And, he couldn't speak anymore. He'd been this fabulous orator throughout his life. And, all he could do was mumble. No, 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 no. That's all he could do. No coherent words. And people thought this was so sad. Oh, to lose your dignity that way. And I never saw it like that, because for my father in his faith, it was very important that he became a model, a role model for his community. So that man never drank, he never smoked, he never swore, and he adhered to a discipline that I couldn't even begin to touch. He had dedicated his life to that in order to to practice literally what he preached. And that was hard going. And so in the end stages of his life, he got to step outside of that. Alzheimer's and in the early days, he would, all of a sudden Dad was cursing and he was doing all sorts, and it was actually quite humorous because he didn't know how to curse because he never did. He'd be like, "Leave me alone, you hell." And I'm like, "Oh, Dad, that's not how you say that."
Not how you do it.
Yeah. And he would come out with all this stuff, and he'd get angry, and he'd cry, and he would do things that never, ever, ever in the course of the 85 years before that he had done. And so he was getting the chance as a soul, still in a human body, to experience those things that he had not allowed himself because of the discipline he had set out for himself. Mm-hmm. And so one night, my mother and I were in the nursing home, and it had been months since my father had spoken, and he just couldn't. And he had sundowner syndrome, so he'd be very agitated, and he'd shuffle around, and he'd shuffle out to the hallway and back to the bathroom, and he'd wash his hands compulsively, and he'd shuffle back, and he would never, ever go and lie down in the bed because he thought if he went flat and he lied down, he'd die. And I thought, how interesting. You've dedicated your entire life to this religion, and you've dedicated yourself to this great beyond and these rewards that wait for you. Yet when you need it the most, you're terrified. And I always found that quite interesting. And so this particular night, had a really, really hard day, and he'd been shuffling around and all. Well, all of a sudden he walks over. It was like 11 at night. My mom and I were tired, but we were still there with him. And he goes over and he gets into the bed, and we're like, okay. And he lays back in the bed, and he reaches up towards the ceiling, and he starts laughing. And my mom's kind of looking at me like, what is going on? And then he says, as clear as a bell, "I can see it. I can see it." And my mom looked at me, and she's like, "Is this it? Is he going?" And I was like, no, because what's interesting is one of the things that I am able to see is when somebody is transitioning, and this can be months up to that. You would think that as your life force is leaving, that it's like a dimmer switch going down, the light's getting dimmer. It's exact opposite. It looks like fireworks. There's this explosion happening in the energy field around the body as it's preparing to leave. And so I'm looking, and I'm like, no, there's a little something going on there, but it's not, this isn't it. And so we just watched, and he goes, "It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful." And he turns to me and he pats me on the hand. And he said, "It's more beautiful than anything you ever wrote about, sugar."
Oh my
And I said, "Okay." And I'm like, well, what do you see, Dad? And he goes, Mama is there. And she looks so young. And I was like, well, that's great. And the next thing, he freezes. and his eyes are as big as saucers. And he goes, oh my gosh, Daddy is there. Now, for my father and for what it meant to be a Christian, my grandfather, his father, had not cut the mustard. And he had really been concerned his entire life because he knew that by my grandfather's actions or whatever, and that's my father's opinion, because there are other people who knew my grandfather said he was a great guy, but, he did things that my father didn't do. I'm sure he probably drank a little, he smoked a little, there were some things going on there that my father had been certain throughout his entire life that his father had not made it. So now all of a sudden he's there and he is seeing his father. And he turns to my mom and he said, Helen, I've had it wrong all along. And we're just like wide-eyed going, what is happening? And he said, you can't mess this thing up. Everybody's welcome here. Oh. And that to me personifies what Christianity, what any of the religions, what they're all trying to strive for. But what's happened in our humanness is we have made them these exclusive little clubs that you have to believe in a certain way or act in a certain way, which never, ever made sense to me, because I'm like, when we're talking about crimes against God, like, is stealing a nickel and stealing a car, are they, which one do you get to go on? Because isn't the intent to steal the same? And that never made sense to me. And I'm going, wait a second, these are just experiences. Because someone's got to play the role, and we all can be all of those roles. There are times in my life when I could tell you hands down, I've been the bad guy. And there are times when I've been the good guy. And there's been times where I was the guy in between. And I think in that statement that he made, everybody is welcome here. That just summed it all up for me. And it was so cute because I looked over and, my mom's eyes are all teary. And she's so funny. And she goes, write that down. You're going to use that later. And sure enough,
Thanks,
I did.
Mom.
Thanks, Mom. Yeah.
So that just feels so good.
Yeah, it does. And that's how that fits in for me. So I don't feel like I abandon. Do I call myself Christian? No, I don't call myself anything. Like, what do you call what I've been through? What do you call that understanding that everybody serves a purpose and everybody is here, and anyone who crosses your path is there to bring a gift. Mm-hmm. And even when that gift is really, really awful and really, really uncomfortable, doesn't it take a very, very loving soul, to forget who they really are in order to play that part for you so that you might better understand? Mm-hmm. And how can that be wrong?
I am so thankful you shared that experience. So good. We still have time. I'm not trying to rush you by any means, but I want to make sure that we hear about your books. When did you start writing and why?
Well, right after I have two daughters. One's 16 and one is 18. And when my first daughter was born and she was small, I started seeing some very familiar things. And it was, oh, she's seeing stuff. And she had a particular gift as a very young child where she could walk up to any pregnant woman on the street and go, oh, that's a baby girl. Oh, that. And I was like, Gemma, we've got to kind of, maybe they don't want to know, sweetie. And she was never wrong, ever. And so I started seeing these things happen. And then you've got the other one who comes in she spent a whole year mad at me because she wasn't Black. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And she still identified with having been Black in a different experience and was absolutely furious that she was now in this white body. And it took her a while to get over it. And so I'm like, I think we might be dealing with some genetic offspring here that are going to have some similar experiences. And so I thought, wow, my parents did the very best that they could with what they had at that time. And having been through all of the things that I had to that stage, I went, you know what? I think I better start writing this stuff down. I wanted my girls to be able to pick up a book and go, oh, that's just like me. Oh, that's not weird. I'm not a freak. That's something that other people can do.
What a good reason.
And that's how it started. And then it's like you want to talk about an addiction. It is, you've got all the stuff you want to say. And I literally am bending time 24/7 in order to get these books out of me, because they're just, one idea after the other comes up. And so, Promised turned into Circles of Light, turned into The Land Beyond the River, turned into the Chakra Fairies and the Pocket Coach. And then when Simon & Schuster picked up the trilogy, they became Promised by Heaven. And then my best friend, Patricia Scanlon, who's an author here in Ireland, decided that we needed to write a book about death. And we wrote a book called Bringing Death to Life. And the publishers were like, but it was fascinating, because they were like, I don't know if people are going to want to talk about this or want to read a book on it. It went to number one the first week.
Exactly why you should write it.
Exactly. And so then after that came Understanding is the New Healing. And I've just completed the first book in a series of gender identity books for kids 9 to 12.
Oh, awesome.
And so it's
That's
just like,
so needed.
they just keep coming. They just keep coming. And, so for as long as they keep coming, I'm going to keep writing them.
Are these downloads that you're receiving?
Oh yeah, some of them are. Like there's one book that I'm, and I would be the type of people who read more than one book at once.
That would be me.
Yeah, and I'm the type of person who's writing more than one book at one time. So I have a couple of things on the go, and I'm working on a book right now called Apotheosis, and it is actually based on memories of an experience for me at over 13,500 years ago. So it starts in, the fabled land of Atlantis, which was not a fabled land at all. And it begins with having just gone through that death experience of me, the character Basset, and being in that space in between and looking back and then recounting the years leading up to that death in that time. And apotheosis, that's man discovering that he already is God, that we're already part of that we're fractals of that same whole, just experiencing ourselves in different ways. So I have that book. And what's so funny about that is that when I went back and I read the first chapter, I was like, what is that word? Interminable? Like, I don't talk like that. And so that book is for sure a download. It is coming from somewhere else, because it uses language that I have
Not
been called
familiar with.
Exactly. I've been called many things, but one of the things that I am called is I'm very blue collar in my way of describing things that are difficult to digest. That happens to be the way that I write. I write the way that I speak, and in a palatable way. Because there's no joy, there's no gratification in talking over people's heads in a way that they can't understand. Like that serves the ego. The whole idea is to be able to tell this stuff in a way that people can connect with and understand and find themselves in the stories. Mm-hmm. And so that apotheosis is different though, because it's just it tickles me when I am going back and reviewing, because I'm like, this is so somebody else's language.
How do you feel about that being used? Well, obviously you're used as a conduit when you're doing your healing type of work in mm-hmm. a lot of ways. How does that feel for you, having that information flow through you the way that it does?
I feel very grateful and very honored that it would, and it's a different experience. Some of the stories I write from memory, some of them happen that way. Some of them I create, the fictional children's stories to describe a principle in life that we're trying to teach. Mm-hmm. They're all different. And so I find through the writing, I'm getting to experience all of the possibilities.
That is exciting for you and for us, because we get to also be a participant when we read your work.
Yeah, it's I'm just a scribe, and I'm a window washer and a scribe, and happily so. And,
it shows. It definitely shows. Yeah. So you grew up here in the States, though. How did you end up in Ireland, of all places?
I know. That's where I was like, oh my gosh, did you marry an Irishman? No. I went over here
Because
chasing
that
ancient
is
symbols.
magic.
Exactly. When I was still in chiropractic school and going into my last year, I was recently divorced. I was sharing the house, my house with a housemate, and I had started seeing these symbols, and not just like, oh, there's a little symbol here. They were flaming orange, so I wouldn't miss them. And they would come in sets of 3. And eventually they became what looked like an alphabet. And so they were these kind of dimensional, holographic type symbols. And I knew that they were connected to actually that story that I was just telling you about, apotheosis, to that lifetime. And so I set off in search. It was a funny story. My housemate was just this great guy. His name was Jojo Yance, Dr. Jojo Yance, and he was brilliant. You know, he was vegan one day, and then he was paleo the next day, and then he was meditating, and then he was, you know, at a rock concert. And he was just this fascinating character. I loved the bones of him. And he comes home one day, and I worked all through school. I was going to school full time, and I had 2 jobs in order to get myself through. And he comes in one day, and he goes, he always called me Holy Sibling. Sibling. And I said, what's up? And he said, do you mind if I have a little get together at the house tonight? And I'm like, oh, I'll be at work. Knock your socks off. And so what it was he was having a psychic over. And so I come home from work that night, and there's all these people sitting in my house. And Psychic Susie's in the front room doing readings. And for somebody who's had all the experiences that I've had, I was just like, yeah, no thanks. You know?
I've never done that.
It was funny. So I went back to my bedroom, and a couple hours later, I get this knock on the door, and it's Jojo, and he's like, hey, she wants to see you. And I was like, yeah, no thanks, I'm good. And he goes, no, really, she wants to see you. And so at this stage, I had told absolutely no one, not Jojo, not my mother, nobody about these symbols. Because it truly was a very, it's like, you know, Moses in the burning bush. It was, you know, beyond cray cray. It was just like, they were so real and so present. And I hadn't figured out what they were yet, although I knew they were connected to me and my past in some way. And I go into her, and she sits down, and she goes, you know what I see? A light switch. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, yeah, a light switch is turned on. And it's in the form of symbols. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, these symbols are guiding you to the next step of your journey. And she goes, that's going to actually be happening in Europe. And then I just started laughing because, like, I had $2.50 in my bank account, a poor student. I still had a year of college to go. And I was like, okay, thanks for that. Bye. And and it was so funny because that was at the weekend, and I get called into the office of the school. I was president of the student body at the time. And I get called into the office of the president of the school. And he said, well, you've just received an invitation to speak in England on behalf of the school as the president of the student body. I was like, England? Really? And I was like, how's that going to happen? And he's like, well, we'll get you there. Do you know? And I'm going, okay, all right. It's not Europe, but it's getting close. And so off I go, and I went to England, and I'm doing my thing there. And I ended up going over to Ireland. And I had this experience when I was in Ireland of getting to travel across the country. And this was during the summer months. And, you know, it stays light until nearly midnight here during the summer. And so I had met, I was traveling with a friend, and we had met this guy in a pub in Galway. And he was like, I'll take you guys around. And we're like, sure, you know. So he's driving us around and showing us bits of Ireland and all this. And I was going into every shop that I could because I was trying to find these symbols, you know, like in every esoteric shop, every whatever. And so eventually we get to, we're at this place, and he goes, I just have to say something. He goes, you are the weirdest person I have ever met. And he's like, what is going on with you? And I was like, well, you know, I'm just looking for something. So next thing, he goes into this little jewelry shop, and he buys, for my friend and I, buys these 2 rings. And he gives me the ring, And he said, I just want you to always remember this trip. It's been such a blast for me. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Thanks a lot. And so it was just like this little silver kind of Celtic symbol ring, Celtic weaving. And I looked down at the ring and I'm like, oh my God, there's one of the symbols. And I am freaking out. And I'm like, where'd you get this ring? And he's like, if you don't like it, she had a whole tray of them. You can go back and try. I was like, where did you get the ring? And he's like, in that shop over there. And so I go in and I'm like tearing through this tray of rings. There's not another ring in the tray that has this symbol on it. And he happens to get that. He's like, all right, I got to know, what is your deal? And I'm like, all right, here's the deal. I'm actually looking for these symbols. And he's like, why did you not say this earlier? Get in the car. So we get in the car. It's like 10 at night. And we drive from the west coast of Ireland to the east coast of Ireland. And we land outside this place called Newgrange. And Newgrange is, a monolithic tomb here. It's a huge quartz-covered mound. It's aligned with the stars. On December 21st of every year at the sun when it rises, which is, iffy here in Ireland if you get to see it or not. But it will go down this passage and it illuminates the inside of this chamber. Still, it's thousands of years old. And it's this incredible place. And so it's a national monument, of course. And by the time we got there after midnight, obviously it was closed. But as we got to the place, the hair on my neck was just standing on end. And we pull up to the gates and he shines the headlights and there's two more of these symbols just in the wrought iron on the gates. And he's like, there are ancient curbstones surrounding this that I bet you anything you're going to find some of these symbols. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he goes, it's now or never. And I'm like, what? And he goes, we're going in. And I'm like, so here I am breaking into a national monument, running across this farmer's field. There's like dogs chasing us. We're covered in cow shite and we're jumping over the walls and in we go. And lo and behold, there some of them are. And so what I've come to find, that's many years ago, is these symbols were part of an ancient pre-Atlantean alphabet called the Goet alphabet. And so you can find smatterings of them in cultures across the globe. You never find the whole set, but you might find 3 in Norway and 2 in Iceland and 6 in Ireland and, 10 in Peru or whatever. And it shows that, they've always been around, always been present, but never collectively together. And what they are, they're actually holographic storage. So if you can picture like a USB key and you look at that thing and go, oh, it's just a little piece of plastic. And then you stick it into a computer. What happens? It's full of information. And so I have spent my adult life working with different scientists, and we'll get there in the end, but cracking the code to be able to extract the frequency from these symbols.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. So that's actually how I got to Ireland. It was
I had no idea it was going to be such an answer like that. I was just thinking, who ends up in Ireland of all beautiful places, right? Mm-hmm. What a story. I can't wait to see where this one ends up. Literally, that just gives me goosebumps. Just the timing and the synchronicity of it all. Unbelievable.
Yeah. But I had to go back to the States. I ended up being able to get myself, I'm a great manipulator. And we can manipulate them positively and in other ways. But I was able to finish my last year of chiropractic school doing an externship abroad. And so where did I come but Ireland? And so then when I had to go back and graduate, everything was on trying to get back here. I had to be here. So that's how I got here. And I landed in this magical little town in the center of Ireland, in the heart chakra of the planet, that's split in two by the River Shannon, so one of the largest ley lines. And I set my practice up here. And so, started working as a chiropractor. And then when those lines started getting blurry, because you've got all these other abilities going on, and somebody's coming in just to get their spine aligned, and, their dead grandmother standing in the corner. And I'm like, I only do that on Tuesdays, So, I've been doing it ever since. And, I love it as much today as I did the first day I set foot on the island. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to go back and forth between the states. My mom is in Virginia still. She's 91. And she travels with me, and she's actually just finishing her first book. And so we'll be...
so good. This is such a good life you have.
It's great.
Aren't you so
really
delighted you chose to come back?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
That is so beautiful. Your experience is so amazing. I wish we had more time. I know that I have so many other questions. I'll probably be sending you an email. But really quick, because we only have a couple of minutes, I want to make sure everyone knows how to get in touch with you, where they can find your books, all of that good stuff.
MaryHelenHensley.com is my website. And you'll find on there as well, there's under the downloads, I have worked with a genius in Los Angeles. His name is Greg Papania, and he has something called signsmusic.com, SINES. And basically, when Greg and I met years ago, I was talking to him about these frequencies, and I'm like, there's got to be a way to put this together, to be able to use this in the healing so that other people can use it, so they can take it home with them, so they can use it in their everyday lives, so that all of us are tapping into that extraordinary gift that we have. Just because I happen to get to see it firsthand doesn't make me so special. It means that I needed the extra lesson, do you know? And so I've been packaging and honing in these frequencies, and they're available on the website. And there's a listener's guide there to explain how everything works. The album and the download is called Larimar Dreams. And within that, there are multiple albums of different frequencies. And all my books are on Amazon. And, so that's that's where I am.
I love it. I am so happy that you shared your time with us. Thank you for showing up and sharing your gifts. Beautiful. Seriously. Thank you.
Well,
thank you
and
very
I want
much.
to thank you guys. Thanks to Eric and to Bill and to you, because you create this platform for people like me to be able to share these stories. And that is equally, that's a key piece of that puzzle.
Yes.
And I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. I feel that. Thank you very much. You guys, we're out of time. Make sure you go to soulwanderings.com and kgraradio.com for all of the information you need to continue to listen to the station and to my show. Have a good night, Wanderers.